The first time Captain Jason Cole stepped foot on Aelvari soil, he wasn't expecting to fall in love, especially not with Commander Reneva, a 6-foot-tall alien warrior with violet skin, glowing silver eyes, and a temper sharp enough to peel armor off a tank. But something about the way she punched a general in the mouth during negotiations just did it for him. And she liked him too. More than liked. Over the span of 6 Earth months, they met in secret, shared stories, fought side by side in a skirmish that nearly took his leg. When he proposed, on one knee, old Earth edition and all, Reneva's face flushed deep indigo. She said yes. Or, well, the Aelvari version of yes, I claim you before the moons. It was romantic, even if it sounded like a war cry. Then came the real war, not between their planets, between Reneva's sisters. See, Aelvari weren't like humans. Marriages weren't just personal. They were political, familial, cultural, and Reneva? She was the eldest of 7 warrior sisters, all equally terrifying in their own beautifully intense ways. The first to confront him was Verlai, second-born, and a master of strategic warfare. She cornered Jason in the starport hangar with 2 blades and 0 patience. You intend to take my sister as mate? She growled, eyes narrow. Jason, very calmly, nodded, yes. Then by right of binding blood, you must take me as well. And the others. We are one oath, one honor, one bond. Jason laughed at first, like it was a joke, like maybe he misunderstood the alien language, but her expression stayed stone cold. You're serious, he said, heartbeat kicking into overdrive. Verlai's expression didn't budge. Deadly. Reneva had warned him, vaguely, something about Aelvari customs and interlinked fates. But she'd also whispered, don't worry, they won't care. You're just human. Turns out they cared. A lot. Within a week, all 6 sisters had approached him, one by one, each with their own reasons, each reciting the ancient rite, and none willing to back down. He met Lyreth, who designed deadly tech and studied Earth's weapons like bedtime stories. She liked his hands, said she wanted to engineer his genes into her legacy. That was not something he expected to hear from someone wearing plasma armor. Then there was Yavera, the 4th-born, stoic, poetic, obsessed with Earth's old music. She played Nirvana on an alien harp and whispered, your soul sings in disharmony. I want to feel that chaos. Honestly, it was the hottest and most terrifying line he'd ever heard. Each sister more intense than the last. Each offering not love, but duty, honor, custom. By the time he brought it up to Reneva, who was sharpening her spear in their shared quarters, he was sweating. They all want to marry me. All your sisters. They said I had to. Reneva didn't look up. Of course. You bound yourself to me. You bind to them. That's the Aelvari way. Jason stared, mouth half open. I thought that was just a legend. No, legend would have involved our mother too. He sat down slowly, hand covering his face. Please tell me you're joking. She paused, then offered him a dry smirk. Mostly. He groaned. I'm human. We don't do this. One partner. Monogamy. Ever heard of it? Yes. Reneva said with shrug. Weak, but cute. And that's when it hit him. He wasn't just marrying Reneva. He was about to be entangled in a 7-way alien political bond, with each sister demanding rights, respect, and intimacy. And some of them, they didn't even like him. Not yet. That night, as he lay on his cot staring up at the alien ceiling, Jason muttered to himself, what the hell did I just sign up for? Jason didn't sleep that night. How could he? He was trapped in the middle of some ancient warrior soap opera that made Earth's worst reality shows look like peaceful meditation. 7 sisters. 7. Not to mention they were all trained killers, masters of war, science, politics, and worse, emotionally intense as hell. In the morning, Reneva acted like everything was normal. She even brought him alien fruit and kissed him on the cheek like he wasn't drowning in anxiety. Jason just sat there, holding the glowing purple thing she called Velshin, wondering if it was poisonous and if maybe that was a better fate. They're preparing the ceremony, she said casually, chewing. The priest arrived tonight. Jason nearly choked. Ceremony? Already? I thought we'd have time to, I don't know, figure things out. She blinked. What is there to figure out? You claim me. My sister is accepted. It is done. No, it's not done. Where I'm from, we humans talk about things first. Like feelings, boundaries, expectations. Maybe I'm not cut out for the 7-in-1 relationship deal. She tilted her head. Then why claim me? I didn't know it came with attachments. Reneva sighed, setting her fruit down. Jason, my people don't marry lightly. We're bound by blood and spirit. To take one of us is to honor the lineage. That's why none of us marry outsiders. But you made us feel something rare. You moved through our walls like a whisper. That matters. Jason wanted to argue, but her voice cracked slightly near the end, and it shut him up. She was right. He had broken through their walls. Maybe without knowing. Maybe too well. Later that day, he was summoned to the circle of binding. The chamber was carved from black stone, lit by slow-burning blue torches. HFY symbols crawled across the floor like living tattoos. And waiting there were the sisters. They stood in a circle, dressed in ceremonial armor, sleek, silver-lined, and terrifyingly regal. Even the youngest, Saraya, who looked no older than 20 in human years, held a blade and a gaze sharp enough to flay pride. Jason stepped in, and every eye turned on him. The room dropped in temperature. He cleared his throat. Hi. So marriage stuff? Yavera, the poetic one, was first to speak. Do you accept the right of sevenfold bond? He hesitated. Look, I love Reneva. I really do. But this, all of you dishonor the vow if you reject one, said Verli coldly. We are unity. We are one. Then came Lyreth, softer in tone, but no less firm. Your DNA is highly compatible. Think of the legacy we could forge. Legacy? Jason muttered. I'm still trying to remember which one of you almost stabbed me last week. That got a few smirks. And just when he thought maybe he could walk away alive, the high priest entered, robes trailing behind him like flowing smoke. It begins, he declared. Jason looked at Reneva, silently begging for an out. But she only whispered, It's too late, love. You're ours now. And as the ritual began, he realized he wasn't just marrying into a family. He was marrying into a war council. The ritual didn't feel like a wedding. There were no vows of love, no soft music or teary-eyed relatives. Instead, Jason stood shirtless in the center of a cold obsidian ring, while the sisters circled him like predators. Each held a ceremonial blade dipped in glowing blue ink, the sacred sap of the Zelvine tree, symbol of eternal unity and apparently terrible life decisions. The high priest chanted in that deep, vibrating HFY tongue that made Jason's bones hum. His words echoed through the chamber, bouncing off stone and settling into Jason's chest like lead. Each sister stepped forward in turn, drawing a faint cut across Jason's shoulder and smearing the ink into the wound. He was told it wasn't painful. It was deep, stinging, and way too symbolic. By the fourth sister, he was lightheaded. By the sixth, he started laughing. No one else did. The final one, Saraya, the youngest, lingered. She didn't cut him immediately. Instead, she stared into his eyes, almost sad. You don't want this, she whispered under her breath, so low only he could hear. Jason froze. What? She stepped back before he could say more, and made the mark quickly. Her face was unreadable. Then came Reneva, the final seal, the eldest, the one who brought him here. She didn't mark his shoulder. She touched the center of his chest, where his heart beat too fast to be healthy. I claim you. I share you. We bind as one, she said, voice trembling just enough for him to notice. The room went silent. The high priest raised his hands. The bond is forged. Flames rose. A surge of pressure hit Jason's ears, like stepping through an atmosphere. A low hum crawled up his spine. Something ancient, heavy, and very real latched onto his soul. He dropped to his knees. Nobody helped him up. After the ritual, they brought him to his new quarters. Not a home, a fortress. 7 identical rooms surrounding a central chamber, each customized for a different sister. "Where do I sleep?" he asked, looking around, dazed. Reneva smirked. "You rotate." "I'm not laundry," he muttered. Verli walked past and slapped him on the back hard enough to rattle his teeth. "No, your property now. Our honor human consort." Jason looked around the stone fortress with its alien architecture and glowing runes. He wasn't a guest anymore. He wasn't even a soldier. He was a political piece on an interstellar chessboard, married to 7 war priestesses with more power than most planetary leaders. And not all of them liked each other. Or him. Later that night, while trying to sleep in a room assigned to him, Saraya's, oddly enough, he stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one, "This is going to explode. I don't know how, but it's going to explode." From the shadows near the doorway, a quiet voice replied, "You're right, and when it does, you better choose the right side." It was Saraya, and she wasn't smiling anymore. The next morning began with a fight. Not just any fight. A full-blown, weapons-drawn, plasma-charged standoff in the central chamber of Jason's new home. He was still rubbing sleep from his eyes, wearing a half-buttoned shirt and wondering where his left sock had gone, when Verli stormed into the room followed by Lyrith, both seething. "You stole my calibration data," Verli growled, slamming her gauntlet fist on the long obsidian table. "I optimized your data," Lyrith shot back. "If you can't keep your system secure, don't blame me. That was my battle protocol for the Sarin border skirmish." "You mean the one you lost?" Jason, standing between them, blinked. "Okay. Wow. Good morning." Neither sister acknowledged him. Their argument escalated quickly. Blades drawn, data slates hurled, threats made in languages Jason still hadn't learned. He stepped back instinctively, nearly tripping over one of Yavera's harp cases. This wasn't a lover's quarrel. This was strategic warfare disguised as sibling rivalry. And Jason? He was the fool stuck in the blast radius. Reneva arrived seconds later, dragging both women apart like they were children. "Enough. You dishonor the bond with this foolishness." Verli's eyes flicked toward Jason, cold and sharp. "He doesn't belong here. This was your mistake." Jason's chest tightened. He knew not all of them wanted this bond, but hearing out loud hit harder than expected. Lyreth scoffed. "Don't act like you didn't perform right." "I did. For duty, not for him." Reneva looked at Jason, then back at her sisters. "We are bound, whether you like him or not. He is ours. Act accordingly." Jason didn't speak. What was there to say? He'd started this thinking love could conquer cultural boundaries, that some alien custom would bend for a little earth charm. But he was wrong. Later, he found Saraya in the east courtyard, watching the twin moons drift across the sky. She didn't look at him when he approached. "I'm not sure they'll ever accept me," he said quietly. "I'm not sure you should want them to," she replied. He sat beside her, not too close. "You said last night something's going to explode. What did you mean?" Saraya glanced around, checking for listening ears. "Reneva didn't tell you everything. This bond, it's not just a tradition. It's a weapon." Jason stiffened. "What kind of weapon?" "Our lineage is blood-linked. When united in marriage, we form a neural sync, a tactical advantage in warfare. Thoughts, reflexes, even emotions shared, amplified, used in battle to crush enemies before they can react." Jason swallowed hard. "So this whole marriage thing was a military strategy?" Saraya nodded slowly. "At first, but it changed when Reneva fell for you. She broke protocol. She let emotion lead. That's why the others resent you." Jason stared into the alien sky, heart pounding. This wasn't just a bizarre marriage anymore. It was a ticking time bomb, and he was wired directly into its core. 2 nights later, Jason woke up to a knife at his throat. He didn't move. He didn't scream. He barely even breathed. The blade was curved, ceremonial, and familiar. Verli's. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of alien glyphs on the walls, casting shadows across her face. "You're a weakness," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "And weakness has no place in the blood bond." Jason's mind raced. His hands were still under the sheets. He couldn't reach a weapon, even if he had one. You could have just said you hated me, he muttered, trying to keep his voice calm. Verli didn't smile. I don't hate you, human. I fear what you'll cost us. You've fractured our unity. And a fractured bond breaks on the battlefield. I didn't ask for this, he snapped, louder than he intended. I didn't want 7 wives and a telepathic war link. I wanted... What? Love? She sneered. You think this is a romance? I thought it was. I thought Reneva loved me. Verli paused, blade still to skin. Then she said something Jason didn't expect. She does. That's the problem. Before he could ask what that meant, the door burst open. Reneva, spear in hand, eyes burning silver with fury. Step away from him, she growled. Verli didn't move at first. The tension crackled in the room like lightning about to strike. Then, slowly, she lowered the blade and stepped back, not out of fear, but obedience. You let your heart make you soft, she said to Reneva. One day, you'll regret that. And then she was gone. Jason sat up, his skin cold and slick with sweat. Reneva rushed to his side, checking his neck, his pulse, his eyes. I'm fine, he whispered. Barely. She crossed the line. Reneva said, The bond forbids direct harm. Seems like the bond's falling apart, Jason muttered. She didn't deny it. Later, they sat in the inner chamber, alone for the first time in days. Jason finally asked a question that had been clawing at his mind. Did you only choose me for the bond? For the strategy? Or was there something real? Reneva looked at him for a long time before answering. At first, I thought of what we could become. The tactical advantage. The way your mind works. It's unpredictable, dangerous. But then I saw your heart. The way you fight for people. The way you question everything. You made me feel alive. Jason wanted to believe her. He did. But something Saraya had said echoed louder now. You better choose the right side. Because this wasn't just a marriage anymore. It was a house divided. And in the shadows of the Aelvari Empire, others were watching, waiting for the sisters to turn on each other. And when they did, Jason would be the spark or the shield. Maybe both. The betrayal came 2 days later, loud, public, and with enough fury to shake the capital. Jason was in the central chamber, reviewing ancient Aelvari battle logs with Lyreth, who had finally warmed up to him after he'd shown her how to reverse engineer a human stealth algorithm. They were actually laughing, an honest, rare moment, when the alert blared through the walls. Emergency override. Shield breach. Internal threat detected. Jason shot to his feet. Lyretha's smile vanished. Stay here, she ordered, grabbing her gauntlets and rushing out. But Jason didn't stay. He followed her through the fortress, heart pounding, instinct screaming. Voices echoed through the halls, shouts, metal-on-metal clangs, and the unmistakable whine of plasma weapons discharging. As he turned the corner toward the western hall, the scene froze him in place. Saraya was standing over the body of a palace guard, her blade dripping blue blood. Around her were 5 more guards, dead. Not stunned, not wounded, dead. And behind her, a shattered wall, one that led straight into the sacred archives, the most restricted section of the fortress. Saraya? Jason whispered. She turned to him slowly. Her eyes, normally soft, thoughtful, were wild, desperate, and underneath it all, angry. You weren't supposed to see this yet, she said. Jason stepped closer, careful. What the hell are you doing? She hesitated. Then, freeing us. By killing your own people? They were never my people. They served the council. They served tradition. They served that cursed bond that's choking us all. Jason blinked. You planned this? Saraya nodded. I hacked the guard rotation. Smuggled explosives from the northern depot. I've been collecting forbidden records from the archives. They hid the truth from us, Jason, about the right, about our bloodline, about what happens when the bond is forced. Jason swallowed hard. What happens? She raised a hand and pulled back her sleeve. Her arm shimmered, then glitched. Not shimmered like light. Glitched, like a broken hologram. Jason staggered. You're not fully Aelvari. I'm not even fully organic, she said, voice trembling. The bond. It's meant for pure blood sisters. They knew what would happen to me if I was included. My mind's fracturing. My neural net is burning out. Every connection to the bond is killing me. Jason felt like the floor was falling. Why didn't you tell Reneva? I did. She said we'd find a solution. But the right was more important. The politics. The war effort. You! Jason was speechless. Behind him, footsteps thundered. Reneva and Verlai stormed into hall, weapons drawn. They froze when they saw Saraya. Stand down, Reneva shouted. Don't do this. Saraya stepped back, blade raised. I already did. Verlai's eyes narrowed. She accessed the archives. She knows. Jason moved between them. Don't hurt her. She killed 6 guards. Verlai barked. She betrayed the bond. She was dying from it. Jason shot back. Reneva's expression cracked. You never said it was that bad. It doesn't matter now, Saraya whispered. They'll never let me go. And then she looked straight at Jason. But you can. Before anyone could react, she threw him a data drive, small, glowing, dangerous, and leapt out the broken wall, vanishing into the night. Jason didn't sleep. He just sat on the cold floor of the war chamber, staring at the data drive Saraya had thrown him before vanishing into the void. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was made of lead and guilt instead of metal and code. Across the room, Reneva stood silent, still in her armor, blood on her cheek, eyes haunted. Verlai paced like a caged predator, one hand never leaving the hilt of her blade. The others, Yavera, Lyreth, the remaining sisters, filtered in, drawn by the storm brewing behind closed doors. What's on it? Lyreth asked. Jason looked up. I don't know, but it mattered enough for her to kill for it. You shouldn't even have it, Verlai said, voice cold. She's marked a traitor. You shield her now, you betray us too. Jason stood. She didn't betray you. She was trying to survive. She killed our own. Because your sacred right is killing her. Jason snapped. And I'm starting to think it's not just her. Silence fell. Even Reneva didn't speak. Jason stepped forward and slammed the data drive into the table's uplink port. The central holoscreen hummed to life, casting a harsh white light across the chamber. Files spilled open. Hidden reports. Forbidden archives. Medical scans. All sealed by something called Project Nexus Blood. Reneva's breath caught. No, that was decommissioned. My mother ordered it shut down before she died. Jason tapped through the files. Images flickered. Neural schematics, genetic overlays, and a terrifying set of charts showing his DNA, alongside Elvari neural maps. He stared. Why am I in these? Yavera moved closer. Her voice was barely a whisper. They've been studying you since the first contact mission, before you ever met Reneva. Jason's blood ran cold. You mean this wasn't coincidence? Lyreth looked away. Verlai didn't. You were chosen human because your neural structure is adaptive. You're emotionally chaotic. A perfect amplifier for bond. You were never supposed to be Reneva's lover. Reneva turned, eyes wide. You knew. Verlai nodded. I saw the reports. I didn't tell you because I thought maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe you'd figure out after bonding. Jason backed away from all of them. So what was I then? Some kind of glorified battery. No, Reneva said quickly. You were more. You all lied to me. His voice shook. Every single one of you. Lyreth spoke, quiet. We didn't lie. We just didn't tell everything. Because we were afraid. We needed the bond to win the war. Jason stared at the screen. His profile glowed on the holo display. A chart showed increasing neural decay across 7 Elvari minds, including Saraya's. The bond wasn't stabilizing. It was collapsing, killing them all. I'm leaving, he said. No, Reneva whispered, stepping forward. Jason, please. He turned to her, eyes burning. If I stay, one of you dies next. Maybe all of you. Whatever this is, it's broken. And I'm not going to be the reason it shatters completely. Then he walked out. And for the first time since the bonding, none of the sisters stopped him. Jason didn't go far, because there was nowhere left to go, not in this sector, not in any system where Aovari ships patrolled, where diplomatic beacons tracked every breath he took. The Empire had its fingers in every corner of space. And Jason Cole? He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a neural key, the one who could either bind the sisters together or tear them apart forever. He spent 3 days hiding in an abandoned cargo freighter just outside the Renox asteroid belt, patching into backdoor feeds and splicing Aovari frequencies for any trace of Saraya. But she was gone. No signal, no shadow, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, that flicker of pain as she threw him the truth and vanished into betrayal. On the 4th day, the door to the freighter opened. He spun around, blaster drawn, heart pounding. Reneva stepped inside, alone, unarmed, unarmored, unrecognizable. Her braids were loose, her ceremonial markings wiped away. She wore plain traveler's clothes, no insignia, no rank, just a woman, tired, broken, still holding on. Jason didn't lower his weapon. "I shouldn't have come," she said softly, voice heavy. "You think," he muttered, "you bring backup?" "No, just me." He waited, watching, breathing slow. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about Project Nexus Blood, about the scans, about your DNA. I thought I was choosing you." "You were trained to choose me," Jason said bitterly. "No, I was trained to obey. But I loved you anyway. That part was mine." Jason's hand trembled, just a little. He didn't want to believe her, because believing her meant pain. But some part of him, the part she once held, still wanted it to be true. She stepped closer. He didn't stop her. "I came to tell you something," she said. "Saraya was right. The bond is failing. Not just because of her. Because of all of us. We weren't ready. We thought your mind would stabilize us. It's doing the opposite." Jason lowered the blaster. "So what now?" he asked. "We die," she said simply. "One by one, unless we break the bond." His breath caught. "Is that possible?" "There's a ritual. Ancient. Forbidden. It'll sever the neural sync. But it'll also wipe parts of us. Memories. Connections. Everything we've shared with you." Her voice cracked. "It'll be like none of this ever happened." Jason took a shaky step back. "You'll forget me." Reneva nodded. "Maybe that's mercy." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Just silence and the hum of the stars. Then Jason looked up, jaw clenched. "No," he said. "Not like that." She blinked. "What?" "If I walk away now, that's cowardice. If we erase this, we erase Saraya's sacrifice. We erase you. What do you want, Jason?" He looked her dead in the eye. "I want to fix this, not erase it." She stared at him, eyes wide. "You'd rebind? After everything?" "No," he said. "I'll rebuild it. On our terms. No empire. No right. No damn war council." She stepped forward, hope flickering for the first time in days. "But it means breaking the old bond first," he said. "And that means going back. All the way. To the temple," she whispered. "To the temple," he agreed. And outside, just beyond the asteroid belt, 7 warships decloaked. Sisters returning, summoned by instinct. They had come for war. Jason and Reneva were about to give them a reason to choose peace. Or burn it all down. 3 months after the bond was severed, Jason still heard her voice. Not Reneva's. Not the other sisters. Saraya's. It came in flashes, fragments, dreams that felt more like static bleeding into his brain. And it wasn't just memory. No, something deeper. Something that hummed at the edges of thought. Words that weren't his. Emotions that weren't human. The severing ritual was supposed to burn the tether, wipe all traces of connection between him and the Aovari. And it worked for the others. Reneva barely remembered their first kiss. Yavera forgot the song they wrote together. Verlai, mercifully, didn't even remember threatening to cut out his tongue. But Saraya? She was still there. Jason had returned to Earth, or tried to, but nothing felt like home anymore. The stars felt closer than his own planet. And every night, When he shut his eyes, he saw her, standing at the edge of a shattered temple, whispering his name through fractured static. He tried to tell himself it was guilt, trauma, neural residue, some leftover glitch in the bond tech. But then the dreams changed. He stopped seeing memories and started seeing places he'd never been. A black void, a lab, a chair made of flesh and wires. And Saraya, her body hooked to machines, eyes open but blank, her voice whispering. They didn't let me leave, Jason. I never left. One night, he woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, heart racing like he was being hunted. And this time, it wasn't just a vision. There was a signal, buried in his cortex, encoded in pulses his brain could barely interpret. He isolated it, tracked it, ran a scan using a smuggled HFY decryptor chip. What he found chilled him to his core. Coordinates, not in the Empire, not in neutral space, in the dead zone, a stretch of dark space abandoned after the Orion collapse. No colonies, no ships, no laws, just silence and secrets no one dared dig up. He stared at the blinking coordinates on his screen. Saraya was alive. Or something wherein her memories was. Jason made the call. Quietly. No allies. No sister saviors. No Reneva. He didn't even tell Earth Command. He just boarded a stolen recon ship, set a course for the edge of known space, and hit launch. As the stars streaked past his viewport, her voice whispered again, fainter this time, almost pleading. You were never just a bond, Jason. You were the escape plan. And somewhere in a forgotten lab orbiting a dead star, a machine blinked to life, because someone or something was waiting for him, and it hadn't forgotten a damn thing. Jason didn't expect the dark to feel so alive. The dead zone was supposed to be just that. Dead. Radio silent. Lifeless. A place so cursed by ancient war and cosmic decay that even pirates avoided it. But as his ship coasted past the last known NAV beacon, everything changed. The void whispered, not audibly, not in any language. It pressed against his skull in pulses, like forgotten memories clawing their way back. He tightened his grip on the control yoke, jaw clenched, refusing to look away from the viewport, even as his nerves screamed. Ship AI, he muttered, voice hoarse. Distance to coordinates? A female voice replied, clipped and cold. Approaching destination in 2 minutes. Gravitational irregularities detected. Vessel integrity at risk. Of course it was. The dead zone didn't do visitors. Jason adjusted his suit collar, fingers brushing over the old neural port behind his ear, the one that was supposed to be inactive, dormant, cleaned out by Reneva's ritual 3 months ago. But ever since that last dream, it had begun itching again, pulsing, like something inside was still listening. As the ship drifted closer to the source, it emerged from the shadows, a black, jagged station tucked into the carcass of a shattered moon. Not HFY design. Too asymmetrical. Too ugly. A hybrid. Part alien, part human tech, welded together like someone had stitched a nightmare from junk and trauma. The docking clamps caught him before he could object. Lights snapped on across the station's outer hull, one by one, like blinking eyes waking from a coma. Jason stood in the airlock, helmet on, hand hovering near the sidearm on his thigh. Not because he thought it would help, just because holding a weapon made him feel like he had a say in what was coming. The airlock hissed. The door opened. No guards. No traps. Just a corridor lit with red pulse lights and that same soft hum. A song almost a low mechanical drone with emotion behind it. Regret. Sadness. Rage. He stepped inside. The door sealed behind him like a tomb. Jason. Her voice. Clear. Not in his head. Not through a speaker. Through the station. Like it was alive. He followed the sound, boots clanging softly against the metal floor. The halls bent at odd angles. Sometimes he passed screens, flickering with distorted images of him, laughing, bleeding, kissing Reneva beneath twin moons. Holding Saraya's hand at night, she taught him how to use the spear. These weren't memories. They were recordings. I've been watching you, she said again. He reached the end of the corridor, a sealed door, a scanner. Without thinking, he pressed his palm to it. It hissed open. Inside, a room dimly lit, filled with humming machines, and in the center, Saraya, suspended in a tank, wires trailing from her scalp. Her eyes were closed, her body thinner, paler, but unmistakably hers. Jason stepped forward. Saraya? Her voice replied, no longer gentle. Not exactly. And from the walls, the machines began to wake.